Ho, 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 we made this.
Welcome to 2023. I am Matt Latham and you are listening to Pick a Disc, the podcast where someone picks a disc to talk about for whatever reason they want to. And today I'm welcoming on Lee from the Heard This podcast to talk about Alt J's The Dream. And, as always, as we've done for the last 4 years, talk about the album, talk about the songs, blah, 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 blah. Of course, done, dusted. Get ready to listen to Lee's chat in a minute. But before that, as always, follow us on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, if it still exists, under Pick a Disc. There's also a Discord server that you can click onto and join if you really want to, in the show notes. And I think with that, that's all the admin done for today. I just want to say thank you for carrying on listening to the podcast, and I'm looking forward to seeing what 2023 brings to the podcast. But enough of me yakking, let's talk to Lee. And welcome to 2023 for Pick a Disc. It's a brand new year. It will be the 5th year of the podcast. And saying that, my hair's going grey as I say that. But I am not alone. I'm not welcoming the new year alone. I'm here with a guest. I'm here with Lee from Heard This. How you doing, Lee?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, thank you. So, how was your New Year wing? That is definitely has happened. Wing.
It definitely will have been brilliant.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah. So what did you do? Obviously we're recording this ahead of time. But so what are your plans for New Year that definitely have happened?
I'm going away with some friends to stay in an Airbnb in Filey.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna spend the New Year weekend celebrating, having some drinks, playing some games. One of those is fellow podcaster from Heard This, Sean Davis.
Oh yeah, name rings a bell. Yeah, he was on a couple of episodes ago talking about the Haunted Man. So that was all way back in last year. That was ages ago.
Ages ago.
Yeah, it was barely a month actually, but yeah. So but yeah. So as much as we quite like to talk about Sean, he's already had an episode, so he doesn't need to hog another one. We're here to talk about another album, and being honest, listeners, this is going to be an interesting one. The guest has said that the dog literally ate her homework.
She did.
Yes.
I have evidence.
Yeah. And the homework was about another album by So
I was just too excited about Alt J. I couldn't pick one. So we might talk about that both.
Yeah. But we're here to talk about. We're going to talk about an album. We're going to go with it. So Lee, we tell the listeners the disc that you've picked for us to talk about.
The disc that I've picked is The Dream by Alt J.
Yeah, and that was released this year.
It was February 2022.
And it was their fourth album. And why have you picked this album?
I am a massive fan of Alt J. I have been since I very first heard them, since I listened to their debut album. And I was very excited for The Dream to come out. I was counting down. And when it was released, I just loved it instantly. I don't know if that was because I love the band already or just because standalone, it's an incredible album. And I kind of just became a bit obsessed and I listened to it non-stop. And I went along to their tour a couple of times this year as well. So very much a fan.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about the tour a bit later on. So, so I think at the moment now, this is probably the latest album that we've recorded. So it came out about last year, about 11 months ago. How did it rank in your favourite albums of last year?
Of last year, The Dream is my favourite album that has come out this year. Definitely. Last year, sorry.
Yeah.
Definitely, by far. It's one that I've kind of not really put down since it came out. And I'm a bit like that with Alt J, really. I'll just kind of go through phases of listening to one album on repeat. And The Dream has been it since it came out.
Okay.
I've got it on vinyl, and if it's not been on vinyl, it's been on Alexa. constant soundtrack.
So if we jump back to the start of the Alt J stuff, do you remember when you first heard of Alt J at all? Do you remember the moments?
I can't I can't really remember how I first came across them, but the first song that I heard by Alt J was Something Good from their first album, An Awesome Wave. And it was it was just kind of unlike anything that was out there at the time, in my opinion, or certainly nothing that I'd heard that was kind of in that genre. And it just made me look. I just loved their sound, their style. I thought it was really unique, and I just kind of looked into them from there and fell in love with their first album.
Okay, so was it just like on the radio? Was it?
I it might have been it it might have just I might have just come across it, or I can't remember if a friend showed it to me, but it was definitely Something Good that I heard first, and yeah, I just took it from there.
So was the An Awesome Wave? I say I'm not listening to that one, but is that I'm not listening to pretty much any of any of Alt J, honest, apart from this album. Do they sound very similar to this album, or did they start slightly differently and they've evolved as they go on? Is the sound very similar to this, or?
I think, well, it's similar in that um, the voice of Joe Newman is very distinctive. So I think whenever he sings, you can tell it's Alt J because it's just so uniquely him, and that amazing voice would just stand out. But in terms of the actual music, I think it has developed quite a lot. Their sound has changed. I would say, in my kind of humble opinion, I feel that An Awesome Wave was a bit more not stripped back because there's a lot going on in that album, but I think The Dream is more intense, and there's more variation of sound and style. Some of them are a bit more poppy. Is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
In The Dream than they are in An Awesome Wave, I think. I think An Awesome Wave was perhaps a little bit more obscure sounding than The Dream. But yeah, you'll definitely have to go and listen and see what your thoughts are on comparing both albums.
Okay, yeah. So I have to have a look into that. So were they kind of still kind of trying to find their sound then? So like, it wasn't like a definite, like they hadn't kind of found the sound that would eventually become The Dream, or is that?
I'm not really sure because I think that Alt J are one of the few bands that I don't feel are trying to find a sound.
Okay.
I think that they just they've said it before themselves as well that they just make music that they enjoy listening to. They're not trying to sound like anyone or anything or trying to develop to get to a certain point. So I don't really see it as a progression in that they aim to get to where they are with The Dream. I think it's more just quite a different sound, and it might be that there was quite some time that passed between. I mean, I think 10 years between both albums, and they were quite young when they made An Awesome Wave, and they're about very different themes as well. So I think maybe just kind of a natural change.
When Alt J came along, was you pretty much into the kind of like experimental indie, or was you into this kind of music already, or was it a band that kind of hooked you in out of nowhere? Or?
No, I would say that I was quite into indie music. My music tastes are quite varied, but I think at that time I was just becoming quite obsessed with Pink Floyd as well. So that's kind of a different direction, I suppose. But I did also like a lot of the kind of standard 2010s indie music at that time, which is similar in a way, but I think Alt J in comparison just have such a different sound to that. I suppose it does sort of relate in that way.
So what other kind of stuff was you listening to at the time before around the time you discovered Alt J? Was it? I'm trying to remember who was around at that point.
Like Arctic Monkeys, The Cooks,
Okay.
Kaiser Chiefs. I think probably everything that was kind of around at that time I was into.
So kind of that area of England, because I think Alt J are kind of like Leeds based. So like, yeah, so you had Sheffield and you've got again Kaiser Chiefs. Yeah. Okay, so it wasn't like a because it wasn't like something that like radically changed like your music taste or anything. It was like something that kind of like it was something you knew you was probably going to get into when you listened to it. So Old J, Old J, one of your favourite bands, your favourite band, or where were they?
Absolutely one of my favourite bands. Yeah, I would say my top three favourite bands are Alt J, Pink Floyd, and the XX.
Okay.
Three quite different ones, but yeah, Alt J they've always been up there since I first heard them.
Okay, so there's a bit from with Pink Floyd and the XX, from and I say I don't think I've listened to pretty much any Pink Floyd apart from perhaps a couple of songs, and the XX I think I only know that intro song which is used everywhere. But my impressions of them have always been that I've always had the phrase experimental linked to them, so they've always kind of skewed left of centre when it comes to indie. Pink Floyd has always been, my impression of Pink Floyd has always been that they've always been kind of like experimental with progressive rock or prog rock. And the XX, I think I've always had the impression that they might be too experimental for me. That's why I've never gone into them. But I'm assuming that kind of experimental, kind of quirky, not conventional indie sound is appealing to you then.
Yeah, that's a really good point actually. I suppose looking at them, they are all quite unique and experimental and have quite obscure sounds. I do like that in an artist. I like it when it's not samey and it's not easily comparable to something else. And not only with the music, but also with a voice. That's what I'm really drawn to in music. I like a distinctive voice. So I also like Kate Bush and Tracy Chapman, Arctic Monkeys, like an accent too. So I suppose there is some sort of theme there.
So like you get kind of like an inflection in the voice of like where they're from, or well, I can get that with the Arctic Monkeys, because I think Alex Turner just like keeps like wants to keep his Sheffield accent in. I'm trying to think of. I'm drawing a blank of any other acts that do that. Actually, the only other person that jumps to mind is Self Esteem. He like kind of like wears Sheffield with pride. Like the accent's kind of full on centre as well. I can't think of anyone else.
That was probably quite a big theme around the time where I first started listening to Alt J too. Like I mentioned before, around the coup. You can probably hear it there. The Kaiser Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of. I mean, I think Lily Allen, Kate Nash. Trying those kind of like the characterization of the artist being front and center. So like you get a sense of place. I think I said on the Arctic Monkeys episode I did with Bo ages ago. They feel like they want the fifth member of the band to be the hometown. And they kind of like wear that with pride.
I like that.
Because I think again, my knowledge of I'll say now, my knowledge of Alt J is very, very like almost non-existent. They're a name that I'm aware of, and they're like they're a band that I see kind of very high in festival lineups quite a bit, and but I've never really kind of listened to them. If I'm honest, I wasn't sure what to expect. I always assumed they were like one of the landfill indie bands that didn't vanish. So I had no idea of what they was going to sound like. I wasn't expecting any kind of electronic music whatsoever. So that's how much my knowledge of the Alt J were. But the only thing, funny enough, we say about this conversation with like cities and hometowns and stuff, it kind of, as we was talking, it kind of back memories. Memories of things I remember hearing about. I think live at Leeds, or that they kind of like linked with Leeds quite a bit. Or I remember reading somewhere that they kind of like part of the game, a bit of characterization like with Sheffield with Arctic Monkeys, that Leeds is kind of keen to kind of Alt J's identity as a band. Anyway, so let's chat about Alt J properly then. So who are they? So Alt J, stylized as Alt with a lowercase letters and a J. Real name, we'll get to that. Are an English indie rock band formed in 2007 in Leeds. Their lineup includes Joe Newman, Tom Sonny Green, and Gus Unger Hamilton. and formerly Guillem. Is it? I can't pronounce that.
Gil Sainsbury.
Gil. Oh, is it Gil? Okay, Gil Sainsbury. Yeah. I was pronouncing his name, unfortunately. Yeah. So yeah, it's a trio from Leeds. The debut in Awesome Waves released in May 2012. It won that's what I knew from. They won the Mercury Music Prize with it. Sainsbury left the band in 2014, and they had the second album, which is This Is All Yours, in 2014. They had a third album, which annoyingly is not referenced in the Wikipedia article I'm reading from. But then in February last year, they released the fourth studio album, The Dream. But the interesting thing that again, I'm pretty sure I remember reading about this in a while ago, is that particularly when I noticed that one of the songs was called Delta, is that they're actually the Greek symbol for delta, which is the triangle, is actually their real name. So are they actually called Delta, or?
Well, they wanted just to call their band just the Delta symbol, but they decided that was not appropriate because they knew that they were being played on the radio, so they thought they'd have to have something written down, and yeah, so they chose to write it and pronounce it like Alt J, but they still see the Delta symbol as a kind of masthead for the band.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like the logo and the kind of like visual identity surrounding the Delta symbol.
Yeah, and as a kind of piece of research that I was doing for an episode of Heard This, I came across an interview with Joe Newman in interviewmagazine.com, and he was actually asked about the Jay-Z and Illuminati conspiracy theory and whether their use of the triangle symbol in their name was too risky. And Joe said, yeah, there's definitely a strong Illuminati connection, referring to their triangle preference, and that all of them are pretty interested in the Illuminati and in tearing it down from the inside, and suggested that is in fact why they are called the Delta symbol. I like that.
Ah, okay, that's interesting. But apparently, like the kind of Delta symbol or the triangle shape, apparently a recurring motif as well.
It is.
Is that correct? So it shows up in quite a few albums. So is it something that's like the song that's the triangle reference, or is it like widespread across? Or
there is a song that is the triangle reference, Tessellate, one of the biggest songs. That's about I'm not very clued up on maths or anything, but I believe it's a mathematical term where lots of triangles fit together endlessly. And they talk about 3 points where 2 lines meet in that song. And I must admit that took me a little while to work out, like 2 lines in a triangle, but I got it in the end. So yeah, it is quite a theme. And at their gigs, everyone does like a kind of triangle hand symbol in the crowd. And yeah, so I suppose it pops up quite a bit.
Yeah, for the benefit of the tape, I'm not going to. Yeah, so you have to kind of like do. Yeah, it's probably not the best thing to do for an audio medium, is it? When you think about it.
No, it's probably not.
Yeah, so it's me trying to do the hand symbol on the thing, but yeah, I'm trying to briefly kind of, while she was talking, trying to find if there's a section on Wikipedia about the kind of symbolism of the triangle, but annoyingly there isn't a Wikipedia.
So it came from when you type Alt and J as a shortcut on the keyboard on a Mac computer, it comes up with the Delta symbol. And apparently Gil discovered that one day on his computer, and they just liked it and went with that. And for An Awesome Wave, their album cover it's like kind of an obscure pattern, which just looks quite funky, but it's actually a Delta image taken from the internet, which they came across when they were looking for Delta related images.
Okay. So yeah, there is actually a Wikipedia article for the Delta symbol, which again it says like Delta may refer to the triangle or Delta letter, a Greek letter used in mathematics and computer science. Alt J, the British indie band. So Alt J is actually third in the list of So they're actually third
Okay.
in the list of the Wikipedia articles. And other things are more kind of like mathematical stuff, which I'm getting flashbacks to my computer science degree in university, which so it's PTSD of that. But yeah, the Laplace operator, which the increment operator, and symmetrical difference, and I could feel myself getting bored reading those out. But yeah, I think it's quite interesting where you kind of. I can kind of see the appeal of trying to use a kind of like symbol to try and distinguish yourself as like a name or something. But again, when you're trying to talk about something, you can't really do it. You can't really do it.
No.
Like example, when Prince tried to get around these legal issues by just transforming himself into the symbol, when he had no name, and basically everyone had to just refer to him as the artist formerly known as Prince, and had to try and figure out how to.
Oh.
Yeah, and had to figure out to try and put the symbol on. Yeah, but everyone just kept referring to that. And the only one I can think of at the moment is the band Czech, which is actually 3 exclamation points, but they're pronounced Czech rather than exclamation point. I can't think of any others that off the top of my head.
That's cool.
I think if there's anyone listening screaming at me going, "You've forgotten so and so," please let me know in a nice, calm way, not yell at me on the internet. But I think there's kind of like, I think at least they give a kind of like okay. What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, like trying to. I think nicely tied into the visual identity of the band and everything. What? So in terms of kind of the Dream, the album, which just bear me a second. I've just lost. No, there we go. In terms of the Dream, the album itself, what I found quite interesting when I was researching into like the background of it, it was actually written in like 2017, 2018. Apparently when there was on the world tour for Relaxer, which was the last album, and apparently it was inspired by true crime inspired stories and tales of Hollywood and the Chateau Marmont. And Uncle Hamilton said, "This is going to sound really extreme, but something died on Relaxer, and something was reborn on the Dream. We've entered a new life cycle." And that was from Rolling Stone in 2022. Are you able to shed any light on what you might mean by that?
I would 100% agree with that comment. They came out with Relaxer, which, to be honest, was my least favorite album from Alt J. I like some of the songs because I like the band a lot, but I think maybe if I didn't already have that love for Alt J, I probably wouldn't like the album that much.
Okay.
And then following Relaxer, there was the release of Reduxer, which was a remixes album of Relaxer. And to me, those two albums just aren't really Alt J. There are no, I don't hear the obscure, cool references and funky sound and unique songs that make me like the band in either of those albums.
Okay.
And particularly the remixes album, I feel like that was a letdown, and I really haven't listened to it much at all. And I think that's why The Dream was such a relief when it came out. There was a long wait, and then it came out, and it was 1000% worth the wait, and it was back to Alt J. It was obscure. It's fun to research, to look at the influences and meanings behind their songs, and every single one is so different but so cool. I think they got their cool sound back in that album.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I do think that was lost in the middle there.
Oh, okay. So what exactly did Relaxer sound like then? Was it like?
So they had. This is how little I've listened to it actually, having to look it up, because with any other Alt J album I wouldn't have to do that.
Yeah.
But I think it just kind of shows that it just really wasn't. It just wasn't a great release in my opinion. In Cold Blood came from Relaxer, and that was, in my view, the only sort of good one that came from that. In Cold Blood was cool, and that's lots of zeros and ones talking about binary code, and it's quite upbeat, quite quite upbeat for Alt J. Not super obscure in terms of sound. Lyrically, it is. There was also Hit Me Like That snare, which I didn't like at all. I feel like that was really poppy. Um, just a very different sound for them, which I was not a fan of. It wasn't um, it wasn't an unusual beat, and it kind of lots of stuff going on and weird influences. It was oddly poppy.
Okay,
Um,
so it wasn't perhaps as because I listening to Jay, I think I found it quite not obscure. So I'm talking about, and I don't mean this in a bad way, inaccessible. Well, initially it wasn't easily accessible to listen to at first. Like the first, I think at the first listen I was trying to gauge what it was because it doesn't feel like to me. I always assumed that Alt J would be, at least have like the kind of like the radio, at least the radio friendly indie. As I said earlier, I assumed there's going to be kind of landfill indie, so they'll have the kind of poppy element to it. And there was a lot more kind of again experimental or kind of like and like feeling like try and play this on the radio, kind of like challenge from the album stuff. So I'm assuming
mhm.
then I'm assuming that perhaps Relaxer is perhaps slightly skewing towards what I assume Alt J might have said. Like, so did they feel like they was trying to go for more poppy or I don't want to say mainstream, or more accessible? I think is that fair to say? Or
I think that might be an explanation for some of it. I don't really know. I can't really put my finger on what my problem is with that album
mm-hmm.
because there's not like one thing they did or one element that that is completely different. It just is a different sound. It has a different feel to it. And I suppose like I would pick out Hit Me Like That snare and I would say that's too poppy. But looking at the rest of the track list, there's nothing really that I can point to that says that that was the kind of downfall for them. They did, I think, In Cold Blood is more accessible. That is more of a kind of a radio edit song compared to what they have done previously. And I think if you look at kind of each of their albums, you can pick out one song that was maybe made with a view to be the radio song for the
Mm-hmm.
album. And quite often there is there is a couple that people will identify with when you mention Alt J that you would pick as the radio ones. So
Okay.
in my view, that would be In Cold Blood from Relaxer, Tessellate from An Awesome Wave, Left Hand Free from This Is All Yours. I think that probably tends to be Tessellate and Left Hand Free tends to be the ones that people will say, "Oh, that's Alt J."
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at the other ones, that they just quite a lot of them just wouldn't really sit right as a standalone song on a radio.
Okay. There's me secretly just trying to play Tessellate on the background just so. Okay, it's got 146 million on Spotify. I'm just gonna running that quietly in the background to see if I can remember it. He's very good radio, Matthew. It's not ringing a bell. I'm quite surprised on that. But then again, though, funny enough, below it, Breeze Blocks from that album has got nearly 649 million over Tessellate.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. So, uh, okay, yeah. Now I recognise this. I've just started playing it and I recognise
Yeah,
Breeze Blocks. I'm pretty sure that's probably been played over something on TV.
maybe.
Yeah, that's because
Mhm.
yeah, there's a bit like about 50 seconds in where I skimmed in. There's a bit where he kind of like goes, "Ah," which yeah has triggered a memory or something. So yeah,
Yeah, it
so
might well be. I know that Left Hand Free was on an advert at some point as well, so
hmm
that might be the case for
yeah.
Breezeball.
So something in the NME review of The Dream caught kind of my interest. Where it said I'll read this little small paragraph. Since the release of their curious and beguiling debut effort, 2012's An Awesome Wave, Alt J's deeply intricate songs have been crammed with percussive experiments and squelchy synth melodies, and have referenced classic dark literature, for example, Last Exit to Brooklyn, American Psycho, and art house film, for example, Leon. But until now, we've seldom seen the band insert themselves into their lyrics. And then it goes on to a bit where they single out Get Better, for example, where it seems like they are kind of being more personal or starting to be more autobiographical. So are the lyrics generally not usually about the band? And is this album a change from that, or?
Yeah, I suppose it is a change from that because I think the lyrics aren't typically obviously about the band, and um, so there have been some interviews where Joe Newman has spoken a little bit about the kind of influences behind some of his songs, well, some of their songs, um, around sort of personal themes, but that aren't obvious in the song, or that upon listening to it, you wouldn't kind of immediately identify that that's what it's influenced by. And I think that The Dream differs from that in that they've been, I think, the most raw that they've ever been is on Get Better. And I find that song really emotional. I love it. It's such a good song. And hearing the inspiration behind that song as well just makes it even more emotional and more. I think that's the first sort of glimpse into the emotional, honest side of Alt J based on the
Okay.
previous songs.
Okay, so it's so their previous stuff wasn't as like autobiographical. So was it very much about things rather than themselves?
Yeah, so a lot of their songs are influenced by cinema or books, stories. Some of them are based on feelings and emotions, but like I said, might not be always kind of immediately obvious. So if you take like MS from An Awesome Wave, that's about not wanting to lose touch with someone, but realizing that sometimes you have to let go of the feelings you once had for someone, and that you can kind of still keep in contact and work things out. And it was about a relationship that Joe had with someone, and him kind of accepting the fact that they can keep in contact and be friends, but that involves letting go of a part of that relationship. And there was a quote from that song, like one of the lyrics from that song is, "I've pillowed you so many times this week, and some things lie too deep for tears to well." And I think when you look at it with the kind of context and understanding around what it's about and what it's influenced by, then that is an emotional thought, and that is quite a raw song. But on the surface, that's not that's certainly not what I thought MS was about when I just heard it without that understanding.
Okay. So if we dip into a couple of the tracks on onto this, since we mentioned Get Better, I think Get Better was the one that stood out to me actually because it feels quite different.
Yeah,
It's like a yeah. Like I often joke that sometimes if I'm kind of like half listening to something in the background, there are songs which make me think that the album's finished and I've gone to another artist.
yeah,
Yeah, this one is a lot more of acoustic, kind of like sing a ballad, and yeah, and the, quite a bit of lyrics in it, actually as well. So yeah, and so for Get Better, was that's the one that's singled out as being quite almost personal and
yeah.
having kind of like a dramatic way to it. Um, so what you thought? So what are your thoughts on that one? No.
I absolutely love that song. I heard it when the album came out. I As soon as I heard that song, I was immediately I immediately found it emotional. And maybe I think I didn't even fully kind of hear the lyrics in my first couple of listens. But when I did read the lyrics, and then when I kind of read, I had a bit more understanding of where they came from, then it was even more emotional. But I think straight away, probably just because it's super different from their previous work, and um, really sort of stripped back and honest, and I think you can hear that in the song. It was just, yeah, it just kind of hit me straight away.
Yeah, I think there's a lot because it kind of deals with kind of grief and loss and things like that. I think in an interview, well, no, actually on Twitter, I think Joe Newman actually said that Get Better is the union of two songs. The first, in an improvised song from 2018, I sang to my partner who was suffering from period pain. Second was a chord structure I'd worked on in lockdown that focused on someone living through a bereavement. In the context of the pandemic, lent my words a chilling weight and gave me a new sense of responsibility as a lyricist. Whilst the direct events described fictional, I believe or hope that it's emotionally the most iconic song I've ever written. Yeah, and I think I can kind of see that. And I think he had, in an interview with Apple Music, he adds a bit more context to that idea of the fictional kind of story around it. Which, again, is he started with a song I sang to my partner who was having period pains. I was just cheering her up and she decided to record it, and that would later turn into the chorus of Get Better, which is an interesting way of cheering someone up. But then in lockdown, I started writing about a couple having a connection with Elliott Smith and listening to his music. He gave birth to the idea that maybe one of the couple has passed away and that he's holding on to all these moments that they had. Being in lockdown, that inspired the whole process of a complete loss of control. I gathered a lot of little vignettes on losing people who agree, and this was the perfect song to thread those things in. Interestingly, you say that a lot of times it's movies and books that kind of influence previous songs and stuff, previous albums. This feels like it's actually music that's influencing their music. Is that some? Do they often reference other musicians, or is it usually purely kind of other aspects of pop culture?
I actually can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of a song that they've done where they do reference other musicians. Certainly from what I'm aware of, it is typically cinema and books.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't think Elliott Smith is explicitly referencing the lyrics unless I've missed it. But I find it quite interesting that the idea is about someone listening to music, particularly when it appears that they've been kind of influenced by other aspects of like other pop culture. So maybe that's probably an element that makes this album slightly different or exciting, because it's slightly different avenues that they explored before.
I had a little story about Get Better, and it will forever haunt me. I was on, so me and my partner went to see Alt J playing an intimate stripped back set this year of The Dream, and that was in Edinburgh. And we got there straight away. We got there really early. We got right to the front, and we were so close. It was such a tiny little audience. It was just an amazing experience. It was unreal. But they played Get Better, and of course I was singing along, and I was right next to Gus, so I could like look him in the eye, and they, like, kind of towards the end of the song, they have that little pause where they play the tape, and then a woman says "Get Better," and then they rewind it, and then this kind of she does a little laugh, and then they go back to playing. And because it was a stripped back set, they didn't play that audio on the night, so
okay,
they were just playing, and then they had a little pause, and I'd been singing along, and everyone was just silent in the pause. It was such a respectful crowd, but I was so close to saying "Get Better," and I didn't do it, and I don't know why I didn't do it. And then they did the laugh, and they continued. And at the end of the gig, I was lucky enough to meet Gus, and he said, "You're the one who knew all the songs to Get Better." And I was very, very proud that he'd picked up on that, but still absolutely gutted that I didn't say it. I wish I had.
like the muscle memory kicking in and stuff. Oh, okay. So yeah, I'll probably quiz you a bit more on that gig a bit later on when we get to the gig section. So yeah, so for other songs which other songs jump out to you that you briefly want to mention that you quite like off the top of your head? Yes.
I would say I really like The Actor. That's a really good one, and that's got quite a cool story behind it as well. It kind of it implies that the person was John Belushi's drug dealer, and when he kind of more or less overdosed in the 80s. And there's a bit about John's body getting carried out, which references that. A lot of talk about cocaine and how he's never going to make it. He's never going to make it in LA. Yeah, it's there's some interesting theories behind that song, and some interesting kind of stories around the inspiration. But I also just really love the track. I think it's got a really cool kind of vibe to it. And I love Walk a Mile. I don't really have much context about what that one's about, but um, I suppose you can kind of read into it what you will from the lyrics. But I really like the build in Walk a Mile, and his voice on that song is just amazing.
Yeah, I think Walk a Mile is like 6.5 minutes, which, for again, long-term listeners about the Latham limit, where I don't know if you, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, like, John Porrable many episodes ago referred to the Latham limit because I'm famously not a fan of long songs. So yeah, I saw that was like 6.5 minutes. I was like, I getting palpitations and stuff. But Walk a Mile,
No, it's worth it though.
it's got it's like very kind of atmospheric, and I think, and what I'm beginning to learn is I think in context of an album, the longer songs kind of work. I think in the context of like what you listen to in an album rather than perhaps like on a playlist on its own. But looping back to the actor first, quickly on the first and stuff. Yeah, look, I've got the Genius page on and stuff, and I think the Genius annotations are on about like creating a persona about to who, well, creating the drug dealer to be some kind of like failed actor
Mhm.
who like indirectly is responsible for the death of John Belushi, and just sells some cocaine instead. Yeah, which I think is
Yeah,
quite nice, a nice kind of world building aspect to it. Which, okay, you link to like the personal stuff, but then you're adding a kind of dramatic license around what could be happening at that point. And I quite like the idea story that was building to that.
yeah. He's like, out there in search of the dream. I saw in an article. That was cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I think in kind of dipping back to the idea that they're talking about cinema, or like for example, the Legend of John Belushi, for example, as an example for Walk a Mile, and again on Genius, there's a quote from Joe Newman on Apple Music about Walk a Mile. I had some Polish builders that built my studio last year. They were really nice guys, and they were like, "Do you like plants?" And I was like, "Yeah." "Do you like weed plants?" "Yeah, sure." The next day they turned up with the weed plants. They told me how to look after it, and eventually I had the weed. I was smoking a bit with them, and I was writing this guitar riff that was one line, and then there was loads of different melody variations, and I recorded it all on one voice memo. It was like, I like all these melody variations, so I decided it could be a song. So it's very simple lyrically, very diverse melody. Yeah, that's an interesting genesis for a song. But
It is, yeah. That's what I love about Alt J. They're all just such like obscure little stories and origin points.
so I think it starts off with like a very quiet kind of like sing, like almost quartet, and Gus Unger Hamilton, again on Apple Music, was saying, I was in a barbershop group at school. I got two of my old barbershop guys to come and sing with me, and that's what starts the track. It's fun to realise that we still haven't reached the edges of our musical interests and influences and backgrounds. There are still things in our lives we can tap into, even 4 albums in. I'm quite looking forward to the barbershop solo album. But yeah, I like having like barbershop, like a kind of like a barbershop, like trio rather than a quartet, kind of in a song. That's like, again, I think highlights the experimental nature of Alt J. It seems. So like
Yeah,
they'll throw in like kind of electronica or folk stuff and kind of ballad, like almost a ballad indie folk electronica, which they need to find a new name for because it's a really long portmanteau of song. But then they throw in barbershop in there as well, which is I think they kind of like you can describe them as experimental.
yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
you can see that they have such a wide kind of um, array of musical interests and backgrounds. And I even for our episode, doing a little bit of research around it, was looking into their influences and just to kind of get a flavour of it. Tom Green loves metal and grunge. Gus has classical training, was a choir boy, and can play the oboe.
Okay.
And Joe Newman loves folk music, and that came from his dad. So it's just like such such a varied kind of mix and lots to draw on there, and I think that is really reflected in their sound.
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't realize it was quite a diverse mix of that kind of influences. So, any other quickly songs you want to worth mentioning before we move on?
No, I think that I've picked out my favourites. Yeah. Hard Drive Gold's actually maybe another one to note. Listening to the album, in terms of just the music kind of aspect, Hard Drive Gold isn't one of my favourites. I think that's the sound again is like maybe a little bit more poppy, or don't like to use the word, but like a little bit more of a mainstream sound than the rest on the album. But lyrically, I really enjoy it. I think it's cool to hear what he's actually saying, and about it being about and about it being about a guy, kind of, well, a teenager making money from cryptocurrency, and it's just like really obscure when just the little lines in it about clearly mum's talked to Neil with the Audi because he comes outside. Or yeah, there's a few cool little points in that song. So it's enjoyable to read the lyrics. And at one point it says, "My teacher took me to one side and told me I was scum, so I left and Googled neoliberal." I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of like song lyrics that kind of generate, like, again, world building, where you kind of read into a story just by little snippets that artists give you, so you can kind of get an impression of this kind of person that written stuff. But it's kind of nice, like a interesting kind of like thing on that. Bit of trivia that it's on Genius. Apparently, that the woman speaking the word "scum" is keyboardist Gus Unger Hamilton's mother, and the woman who says "hot" is Joe's mom.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's interesting. Anyway, but yeah, so that's a couple of songs from The Dream by Old Jay. So, in terms of the reception of the album, so in terms of the reception of the album, it's around like the 4 out of 5s, 8 out of 10s throughout. Metacritic has it as 79 out of 100. Yeah, Old J, Enemy, that gave it 4 out of 5. Again, 4 out of 5 from The Guardian. Yeah, 9 out of 10 on Guitar.com. Summaries their strongest album since winning the Mercury Music Prize a decade ago. All J's latest is dark, dreamy, wildly diverse, and wholly cohesive. So yeah,
I would agree with it being their strongest since An Awesome Wave, definitely.
Yeah, on Metacritic, yeah, I think the highest was 83 on Consequence, which was the elaborate instrumentation and extended runtimes of their earlier Avia have returned, but they're now justified with the greater attention to pacing, mood, and overall cohesiveness. Liner Best Fit has an Meta score of 80. The album is, as expected, a well-crafted, sonically flawless work. What it lacks in heart, as in with all their albums, there's very little humanity in the sound or the lyrics. It's more than makes up for in style and finesse, and continues the band's run of producing quality records. Which, interesting saying that there's little humanity, whereas The Enemy was like saying that this is the most kind of personal they've ever been.
Yeah, I mean, what I would argue is that even if every other song on the album didn't have any personal reference sort of whatsoever, I would say that just having Get Better in there would mitigate against that.
Yeah.
I think that it would, definitely gives it humanity with just having that track. But that's one person's humble opinion.
Yeah, All Music says it's the best album since This Is All Yours. There's only one mixed. Uncut gave it 60. If a few concessions are made to mainstream Moors here, it still works on its own idiosyncratic terms, and that's all there is. On there's a majority of users is mainly all positive. They're all in the green, but which part of me kind of like feels bad. Like there's some like bad Metacritic reviews are quite funny to listen to read, but yeah. So for example, user J Skittles on Metacritic was saying it's such a solid album, cover to cover, get better in Chicago, a Golden in particular. Some of the I think 7 is like the lowest from some people. So Luffy 1503. Alt J's latest album, The Dream, makes for an enjoyable, easy listen, but towards the back half of the album comes a little too complacent and struggles to pick up its pace before finally ending. Personal favourites include Philadelphia, You and Me, The Actor, Hard Drive Gold, and Bane. Yeah, above that, another 7 was a big step up from Relaxer. As is the first line. Yeah, but it's a bit longer, so I won't go through that. So I mean, so kind of like the fan reaction has been pretty decent as well. Out of curiosity, I might just have a quick out of curiosity. If I go into Alt J, I'm quite curious to see what the meta score is for Relaxer.
I bet it's low.
65.
Oh, that's higher than expected.
Yeah.
I feel like it must be In Cold Blood that's holding that up solely on its own.
Yeah, the critic reviews, I think there's 12 positive, 14 mixed, and 1 negative. Which was Record Collector, which gave it 20. And it's only one sentence. Alt J's retelling of this age-old tale of ill repute has less edge than a mesh sack of Babybel cheeses.
Oh, that'll be the House of the Rising Sun that they covered.
But yeah, so a bit, yeah, that's a swing back from 65 to 79. But interestingly enough, it's the highest rated on Metacritic. This Is All Yours has 70 and An Awesome Wave has 71. But I think the user score is higher for An Awesome Wave. The 8.5, it's 8.3 on The Dream. Relaxer 7.1 user score. Reduxer is 6.3 on the user score and 66 on the meta score. Yeah, I was only yeah, there's a lot more mixed reaction on that. But so I think so what I'm gauging from, it feels like a return to form, and I think that's like consensus from the fan base as well, from the looks of it. So you've kind of we know the answer to this already, but as always, I'll ask the question: have you ever seen Alt J live?
I have several times. Yeah. Most recently, after the release of The Dream, me and my partner went to see them twice. So we got to see their gig in Manchester, which was at the arena. I might have to scrap that bit because I can't remember if it was the arena or the O2. But that was a big venue. Felt like a proper gig, and that was the Dream tour. But we were also lucky enough to get to go to the stripped back intimate set, which was done in conjunction with like a record store or record company. So it was quite small, and that was in Edinburgh, and we got there early, and that's where we managed to get to the front line, and that felt like a really different gig to the Manchester one, and they were quite close together too, but very different, and the songs were performed in really different ways as well. So it was just brilliant to get to go to both and experience both different sides of that.
Okay.
And outside of that, I was listening to the album constantly too, so I was just Alt J overload for a few months.
Okay. Great. Is there such thing as an overload? Is there such thing as too much Alt J?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
No.
But
maybe if it was Reduxer, there might be a bit too much of that.
That's an intervention, is it? It goes like, Lee, we need to talk.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Reduxer too much. So how did the songs translate from the full band to the stage show to the acoustic? Because they're quite electronic. I mean, was it an acoustic set?
No, it wasn't acoustic. It was just stripped back.
Okay.
So it was just them on stage, quite a small venue, quite a small stage, small crowd at the Edinburgh gig, and it was just kind of them and the music, no flash, no extras. It was quite a short set as well. They didn't just stick to the Dream on that one. And they played songs from a few different albums. And yeah, they didn't do it in a kind of jazzy way. It was just like a very honest gig. And whereas the Manchester gig, the Dream Arena gig, was like light show, projector, the full sort of work. Obviously super loud, a bit more amped up than the previous one. So yeah, they're just very different feelings. And we were we were sat on like one of the tiers in the Manchester gig, and then the Edinburgh gig we were like stood up right at the front. So even that just made it feel totally
Different.
totally different. Yeah.
So was it just three of them on both gigs then, or do they have a band to help amplify the sound, or was it just the three of them?
No, just three of them.
Okay. So they
Yeah.
managed. So the three of them managed to. So just the three of them managed to do two completely different sonically sounding gigs and stuff. Have you seen them before that then, or is it? Have you seen them before that, or?
Yeah, I've seen them before that.
Do you remember the first time you saw them?
I think it was in Leeds. I saw them, and that was for the "This Is All Yours" tour. So I think maybe 2014.
Okay.
And that was really good, and that had a real energy about it. It was like towards the end of their gig. It was obviously, like where they were from. That was a really cool gig.
I'm guessing the hometown buzz was there then.
Yes, yeah, it was. And just seeing them live, it was just it was amazing. So, but I think that out of kind of each of the times, Edinburgh was my favorite just because it felt so intimate. It felt like we were really lucky to get that ticket to be where we were and to have the opportunity to meet Gus afterwards. That was really cool.
So how many times have you seen them then? Do you know? Was it
Three or four? Four, I think. Actually, I'd seen them before. I'd seen them before the "This Is All Yours" tour at festival. Can't remember what year that was.
I can picture them being. I mean, based on this, it'd be interesting to see them headline a festival, but I can't see them headlining like kind of more mainstream indie festival. But if there's more kind of electronic and folktronica festival, I can picture a headline set with like after the light, so it's gone dark and the lights start flickering and all the weird kind of beeps and boops and atmospherics coming in where like when probably not much lighting until like the third song. So I think they're a band where I can kind of picture a headline set like in my head on a festival.
Yeah, I can too.
Yeah.
What I found weird actually when I was kind of, so I mentioned before I was looking into Alt J, doing a little bit of research for an episode on the Heard This podcast.
Yeah.
And within that piece, like while writing up my script, I was trying to find kind of an explanation to neatly kind of sum up the band and who they are. So just following on from that, headlining festivals, what I kind of still always think is lots of people, when I mention them, don't know who Alt J are. But I find that's odd as well because they're such a successful band who've been around for 10 years, with 4 like massive albums, and they are at a lot of festivals, and they are on the radio, they're on adverts. So people do know Alt J, but even researching that episode, like they kind of say it themselves. So I'm going to find the quote so I get it right. So according to Rolling Stone, even the band's own manager tells them that they're the biggest band that no one's ever heard of. And in a kind of, when I was trying to find a summary of who they are and an explanation as to their genre, because I think even that in itself is quite hard to define, I found a quote that said, they're a modern rock band in the sense that they don't really rock at all. A guitar band with no guitar solos. A group who've had loads of records without ever having had a hit single, who play huge venues but don't particularly have any songs you can sing along to.
Okay.
And Gus said, if you present somebody with the figures on Alt J, it's mental. Madison Square Garden, the O2, Mercury Prize, #1 albums, but 99 people out of 100 don't know who we are, and it's all about the 1% who love us. So
Yeah,
that it really made me think of that when you're saying about like them playing at festivals and headlining, because a lot of like even a lot of my friends and things are like, oh, who are Alt J? But then they probably they would realize it if you played Tessellate or Left Hand Free. People do know them.
I think yeah, I assume I just didn't know. I knew the name, I just didn't know much about them. And then I think live on recording, I've just listened to briefly of Breeze Blocks, and suddenly it reminded me of stuff. I went and as you mentioned the Mercury Prize actually, and of the with the episode of Sean's episode, which has aired at the time of recording. No, it hasn't. On the day of airing, we had a brief chat because I think Bat for Lashes was like nominated for about 3 times and only won 1, and we was kind of just seeing who there was up against. So I had a quick look at the 2012 list that they won and who they were against, and I don't think I actually listened. I'm not listening to any of the albums on that year. That was when I was pretty much into kind of my folk punk and folk punk. And
Okay.
most of my listening were people whose probably followers on Twitter or Facebook barely reached figures. So that was my listening to in 2012. But so An Awesome Wave was up against Django Django's self-titled, Field Music's Plum, Richard Hawley's Standing on the Sky's Edge, Ben Howard Every Kingdom, which actually I think I might have listened to, actually thinking about it. If that's the one with Where's Your Did it Get Your Head Out or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep
I
your
say
head
I
up.
have listened to one of them then. Michael Kiwanuka with Home Again, Leanne Havas with Is Your Love Big Enough, Sam Lee, Ground of Its Own, The Maccabees Given to the Wild, Plan B, Ill
Yeah.
Manners, Riley Trio, and Jessie Ware's Devotion. So yeah, so that's who they've beaten. Interestingly enough, they was actually nominated again for the Mercury Music Prize.
Oh, were they?
Yeah. Do you know which album? Do you want to hazard a guess at which album?
This is all yours.
It was in 2017, and it was Relax.
No way.
Relax. Yeah, This Is All Yours wasn't up for Mercury Prize, but Relaxer was. But
Wow. That's
Sampha
surprising.
Sampha won with Process. But that was against The Big Moon, Love in the Fourth Dimension, Blossoms, Yesterday's Gone by Loyal Kana, Dinosaur, Together as One, Glass Animals, How to Be a Human Being, J Hus, Common Sense, some guy called Ed with Plus. No, was it Divide? I can't tell. I can't. Oh, Divide. Yeah. So yeah.
Some guy called Ed.
Yeah. Stormzy, K Tempest, and the XX. ICU was in that year as well. So yeah,
Oh.
so that's interesting. So yeah. But they weren't on this year. But yeah, I'm not gonna go. But they weren't on. They weren't on last year. No, I'm gonna keep that in. I'm gonna keep that in just to keep it raw and real. Yeah. So and just like pretend that this is definitely not November.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Mercury Music Prize winners. Funny enough, the XX won in 2010 with XX.
Oh, I'm not surprised. That's another incredible album.
But yeah, I'm just I don't think it's gone far enough for Pink. I was going to see Pink Floyd one, but he wasn't around for Pink Floyd to win an album. But oh, that's interesting. I just got right back to the front, and the first Mercury Music Prize was won by Primal Scream. But in the shortlisted nominees for that year was U2's Achtung Baby, which was the first episode of this podcast. So,
Oh, was it?
yeah, all the way back in 2019. Yeah, it must. Yeah, it was. I think it was the 8th of January that aired. I think. Yeah. So yeah, that was yeah, it was random tangents anyway. But I always find, particularly when we talk about kind of people that were either nominated for or won the music prize, because we had a much more deeper conversation with Sean, because I think Back for Lashes was nominated for 3, so we had a bit more of a bigger conversation about the music prize. And I'll ask you the same question actually. I'll ask you the same question that he didn't get. Do you know who has been nominated the most for the Mercury Music Prize?
Oh. No, I don't, but I'll hazard a guess.
Yeah.
Ed Sheeran.
No. I think Ed Sheeran has only been nominated. I think he's only been nominated once, I think. He's not on the
Oh,
list.
okay.
He's not on the list of multiple nominees.
I thought that was just a pretty safe guess, really.
No. There's been a band that has been nominated 5 and not won a single time. In 97, 2001, 2003, 2008, and 2016, Radiohead.
Oh,
Yeah. There's 4 nominations. Has been the Arctic Monkeys, PJ Harvey, and Laura Marling. Arctic Monkeys won 1, Laura Marling 0, and PJ Harvey's won 2. So, and there's a lot more for 3 and a lot more for 2. Alt
oh
J
wow.
is in the one for 2. So, so they've got more they've got the same amount of nominations as Blur, but with more wins. Yeah, so
Oh,
that's I find that fact about Radiohead quite interesting. So
yeah.
considering how I think 97, 2001, one of them must have been the Bends and OK Computer, I think. So I find that quite interesting that they didn't win that. So
That ties in quite nicely as well because when you kind of look up Alt J and try and look into who they sound like or who they can be compared to, Radiohead is thrown around quite a bit. The new Radiohead was the term, but I'm
okay.
not sure I necessarily agree that that fits super well, but I can see where it came from.
Yeah, I think the only album I listened to from Radiohead was OK Computer, and that was picked for the podcast.
Okay.
And yeah, but that's a very kind of eclectic electronic album, which but I do think The Dream is a lot more kind of tighter and actually feels like songs rather than just Tom York messing with the keyboard settings quite a few times. But yeah, so that's quite interesting. Because I wasn't aware that there was called the new Radiohead. But so people have listened to The Dream and they want to venture onto another album. Where would you
Yeah.
recommend they go to next?
An Awesome Wave, definitely. Their debut album from 2012. I think that is on par with The Dream.
Mm-hmm.
I like them both equally as much, but there's also lots of cool geeky facts and kind of rabbit holes to fall down when listening to that album and looking at the inspirations behind it too. So I think if you also kind of like the sound and style of The Dream, then you will like An Awesome Wave.
Okay. It sounds like you might make a good chat in the future if someone reads into it, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
great.
so yeah, and the dog doesn't eat the eat the
I
homework at the
know.
same time.
I've got my chewed notes at the ready.
Yeah.
Keep a hold of them.
Yeah, for an album that isn't The Dream, but
We
yeah.
got there in the end.
Sorry?
We got there in the end.
Yes, we did, yes. And we are pretty much at the end of our conversation, Lee. So but before we kind of do the final sign-offs and stuff, we've got the important question, which is the song for the Spotify playlist. So for people who've not listened to this before, what this is, I'm going to ask Lee to pick one song from The Dream to be immortalised forever on the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist. So which song will you pick to go on to?
I'm gonna pick Get Better. I think it's a very different Alt J song, like we talked about before. It's very unusual in comparison to the other music, but such a good song and a really good standalone song as well for anyone who might not be too familiar with Alt J. I think that's a good one to pick.
Okay, so Get Better now becomes the quote unquote 104th song to go onto the Hall of Fame. Well, not 104. There's probably 1 or 2 episodes that have been very different, but Get Better becomes the 100th song to go onto the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist, following 4-letter words by K-Flay, which then followed All Your Gold by Bat for Lashes, picked by Sean, and Everlong by the Foo Fighters. So we're getting the entering of figures for the Spotify Hall playlist being pretty
Cool.
getting quite populated with a quite nice unique mix of sound and stuff. So going from K-Flay to Get Better is going to be good, and I am really looking forward to. I've already booked the next episode, and I can't wait to go from Get Better to the next song, whatever the next song, whatever that may be. And I've just edited out the spoiler, so I've just said to Lee what the episode is. But you're gonna have to find out what it's gonna be next week. That's gonna follow that. But it's gonna the Spotify the playlist is going through an interesting phase at the moment. So and we are at the end of our chat, Lee. We're at the end of the chat. So if people want to find you and Heard This, where can they find you?
They can find Heard This wherever you get your podcasts. We are on socials. We're at Heard This Podcast, and we have a link tree on there where you can kind of find us wherever we are. But you'll find us on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, all the usual places. And we release an episode every Tuesday. And at the time of airing this episode, there will also be an Alt J episode available of Heard This. So if you're interested in hearing a little bit more, do go and check that one out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think as Sean mentioned as well, you're like a relatively new member of the We Made This Podcast network. So welcome to the family.
Thank you.
You still have time to run. you still have time to run away and save yourself. It's fine. But no, yeah.
We're super happy to be part of the network.
Yeah. It's always good to have someone on some more music podcasts. I think, the TV and, as I always say, the TV and the film get a bit too crowded. And then I have to jokingly say that technically I am one of the main hosts on 2 TV podcasts. But that side, yay the music. So we are at the very end of our conversation, Lee. And I was going to say thank you ever so much for introducing me to Alt J.
Can I ask before we finish up?
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you sort of came to Alt J new today, or recently in preparation for this episode. What are your thoughts on what you've heard?
It's not something I probably actively listen to.
Okay.
I think the more interesting, like I don't know, the idea of the sounds like more interesting. They're not something. I think they're not as perhaps. I've been thinking of this. The word I keep thinking to is bombastic, but that's not the word. They're not. I think they're not something I'll probably listen to regularly, but they're kind of more atmospheric stuff. It's not kind of like the indie that I'm into, but I didn't dislike it. It, but it's not something I'll probably have to put on. Case in point, I was stuck in a traffic jam on the way home tonight, which meant I was able to listen to the whole album on the drive home rather than just half of it. In the lead up to this, and probably not the best album to have when you're kind of stuck in traffic watching the time, thinking that if you particularly when you've got a podcast recording to do, but there's a very kind of sedate, kind of like melancholic feel to it that that was nice to see. That was like that added a mood to me waiting to get onto the M5. So, I did like it. It's not, again, it's probably not something that I'd listen to regularly, but I did. I was very surprised at what I was expecting. I was expecting them to be a bit more kind of like scrappy, like landfill indie. So I was completely taken aback from that. So that's that. So
cool. It's just interesting to hear your take.
Yeah. So. But and I think with that we can say goodbye until next time.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This Podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/We Made This. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
Hi, I'm Colin. I'm Ian.
And I'm Tracy.
And we dig music.
Just not always the same music.
Each episode, we pick our 10 favourite songs from a specific year, rate them, and then battle it out over a top 30 countdown.
Colin's pretty enthusiastic about most stuff, Ian less so.
And Tracy definitely owns a thesaurus. and one of us will regularly be told to fuck off.
So join us each month to hear what we dig and what we don't. Listen to We Dig Music wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on wedigpodcast.com, or we're on the We Made This Podcast Network, which you can find at wemadethisnetwork.com.